Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the TrainAid HQ. My name is Nick, and in today's video, we are looking at the Level 3 Certificate in Assessing Vocational Achievement, otherwise known as the CAVA qualification. We are going to be looking at the professional discussion element of the course. If you're new here, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel to receive the latest alerts and updates from the team here at TrainAid. So welcome to the video, and we are looking just at the professional discussion of the assessing qualification known as the CAVA. So the purpose of this video is really break down what is the professional discussion, what does it entail, and how to complete the professional discussion form. So let's dive straight into this. So the professional discussion is a planned in-depth conversation between the candidate assessor who is undertaking the assessing qualification and the qualified assessor as well. So it's an opportunity for the candidate assessor to explain what they have learned throughout their assessing course, what they've learned throughout their assessing journey, and highlight their strengths as an assessor and any areas for development, any areas for improvement for their future practice as an assessor. So the professional discussion happened at the end of the assessing course. And this should take place after the final assessment has been administered, and that the qualified assessor has indeed observed the candidate assessor within one of their 8 assessments. So just to reiterate again, the professional discussion must take place after the qualified assessor has observed the candidate assessor deliver their final assessments, and the qualified assessor will in fact listen to the candidate assessor during the professional discussion. So it's an opportunity for the candidate assessor to talk about themselves and what they've learned from their course journey. The professionals discussion should take place within a private setting where it's quiet. It's an opportunity for the candidate assessor to talk just about their journey and what they've experienced to date as well. The qualified assessor will ask a range of questions, which is on the template, and the candidate assessor will obviously respond, and it's their own thoughts and opinions as well. So the qualified assessor will listen to the candidate assessor, and the professional discussion, the actual answers, they can be handwritten or typed as well onto the form, which we'll just show you in a moment. The professional discussion must be signed and dated by both the candidate assessor and the qualified assessor as well. So we require 2 signatures and also the dates as well. So just coming on to our professional discussion form. Okay, so all questions to be asked by the qualified assessor, and the candidate assessor must respond with their thoughts and opinions as well. So we just have obviously the form here. We have the candidate assessor name. This is the person undertaking the assessing qualification. And on the right hand side, we have the qualified assessor name as well. That's the observer. And if you need to send in the qualified assessor certificate, please do send that in to us, and we will release this professional discussion form as well. So the professional discussion, once again, it can be typed or handwritten. On the left hand side, we have the assessment criteria, which is a range of questions. In the middle, this section is the comment section. This must be completed by the candidate assessor undertaking the course. So a comment must be written by the candidate assessor within every box. On the right hand side, we have the achieved column, which is simply a yes or no. This must be completed by the qualified assessor as well. So just a yes or a no, or a tick or a cross can go into this column here. So when it comes to the first question, we have, as an assessor, how do you plan assessments with your learners and candidates? So this is to be written by the candidate assessor undertaking the qualification. So for the first question, that thought-provoking question, so as an assessor, how do you plan assessments with your learners and candidates there? So you need to be thinking about what administration do you provide learners? How do you plan for assessment? So do you carry out perhaps an initial assessment form? Is there a planned activity? Do you ask learners, do they require any additional support? So anything like that would really go into this section. So during your 8 practical assessments, whilst you've undertaken the CAVA assessing course, what elements do you use to help to plan your assessments there? Okay, so please put in your comments there, and obviously the qualified assessor can put a yes or a no once that question has been answered as well. The next question is, how do you select your assessment methods to meet awarding body or company requirements as well? So perhaps you create your own assessments, or they're prescribed, they're given to you by an awarding body or an organization. So please do elaborate on how do you select your assessment methods. Perhaps you're told to conduct assessments in a certain way by an awarding body or a company, and you have no say within the adaptations there of the assessment methods as well. So please do talk about your typical assessment methods, whether it's perhaps an observation, an exam, for example, that you ask learners to complete. So please do talk about how do you select your assessment methods. Is it your choice perhaps, or is it an awarding body's there? The next question is, how have you ensured your learners are ready for assessment? So perhaps you give them some pre-assessment targets in the build-up to your assessments taking place. So please do talk here about how you prepared your learners fully for their assessment. Perhaps you send them reminders, perhaps you've given them some pre-course material to complete. Perhaps you've conducted an interview with them in preparation for the assessment as well. So do please talk to us and also your qualified assessor as well about how you do prepare learners to ensure that they're ready for the assessment as well. So that's very important with all assessments, that learners are fully prepared. The next question is, what resources are required for your assessments? So things such as paperwork, it could be perhaps a clipboard and pen, so you can write your assessment report on. Perhaps that you have to have a camera, a video camera, to take photos and videos of the assessment taking place as well. Perhaps it's also resources for the learners to use within their assessment as well. So really what resources you use, and also what learners what resources your learners perhaps use within this assessment as well. So for this question, please do reflect on what resources you're using for your assessments. The next question is, what factors do you need to consider when planning your assessment environment? Okay, so things that you could consider here is perhaps the busyness of the environment. Ideally, assessments can take place within a quiet environment, so the learner has the opportunity to keep focused and to concentrate. So think about the environment itself. Okay, so what do you need to consider? Perhaps it could be a room booking. Perhaps you need to factor in other staff to be perhaps invigilators or support staff for your actual assessment to take place. Perhaps you need your own shift covering as an assessor. So you need to perhaps notify managers that an assessment is taking place. You could also consider the factor of booking out technology, resources, materials, all of those important factors when assessments are taking place. Our next question is, what arrangements do you need to take? What arrangements do you need to make with other staff when preparing for an assessment? Once again, this could be talking about managers. It could be about talking about site safety team as well. So if an assessment is perhaps taking outside, you need to let obviously your colleagues, your supervisors and managers know that this is taking place. Very important we do that. Once again, you could talk about covering perhaps shifts as well, letting your colleagues know that you're going to be busy during perhaps the assessment hour as well. So all of those things, how do you let other staff know that an assessment is taking place, and who are you going to make aware of within your organization? So do please reflect on that as well. So who do you need to make aware of? Our next question is, how have you taken account of the learner's individual needs for their assessment? For example, shift patterns, additional learner support if required, and current achievements as well. So for this question, we would like for you to think about, how do you take into account the learner's individual needs? This might stem from an initial assessment form or an interview that you find out the learner's perhaps learning style, whether they need perhaps any additional support, perhaps they need perhaps a reader or scribe or extra time. So all of those considerations are very important within assessing, and you as an assessor, you can of course make adaptations as well. But we'd like for you to explain, how have you taken account of learners' individual needs as well, and do describe if a learner has perhaps taken a night shift. Have you had to make any changes there to an assessment? Have they been given extra time, or have you adjusted the assessment date? All of those things that you could reflect on with this assessment question here. Just moving on is, have you used holistic assessment method within your assessment? So holistic assessment is where you're assessing more than one element during an assessment. Okay, so for that question, if you've used assessment, so you've essentially assessed perhaps 2 or 3 elements during one assessment, okay, then please do describe this as well. Perhaps you feel that learners are confident in one area and you've said, I don't need to see that. I'm very confident that you can demonstrate that. We're going to fast track. We're going to move ahead to another assessment element. Perhaps do describe where you've used holistic assessment before. This, of course, is optional. If you haven't used holistic assessment, then please don't worry. It's obviously down to your own assessments whether you use holistic assessments or not as well. Our next question within the professional discussion is, how have you ensured the assessment method used are valid, fair, and reliable? So very important with the decision-making process that we ensure that assessment decisions are valid, they're fair, they're honest, and reliable as well. So has the learner met the full criteria? So how have you ensured that this has happened? Okay, so in terms of your assessment methods, okay, perhaps reflect back on those and really think about, are they robust enough? Okay, look at your standards or criteria. Are your assessment methods suitable for your current your course or qualification there? And really, this question is all to do with your decisions as well. So how do you ensure that your assessment decisions are valid, fair, and reliable? Perhaps you might use another assessor for a second opinion, or perhaps you monitor the criteria very closely there. Our next question is, how have you matched and measured evidence against the required outcome criteria and made your assessment decisions as well. So for this question, we would like for you just to explain about your mapping skills, perhaps talk about your standards and criteria, and just talk about how you have mapped your evidence against your criteria as well. So talk here just about your mapping skills. You can talk about what criteria you have used for this assessment portfolio. Okay, how have you demonstrate how you've demonstrated mapping within the assessment portfolio here as well. Just moving on, the next question is, how do you ensure consistency and standardization within your organization? So this could be chairing of standardization meetings where you and other assessors might compare assessment decisions. This might happen perhaps on a monthly basis, so you could explain about that. As we know, assessment meetings where standardization takes place, that's very important to ensure that all learners receive a consistent feedback and assessment approach with all assessments. You could also talk about consistency. So you could obviously share good practice with other assessors about how you provide feedback to learners there as well. So please do talk about how do you ensure that consistency and standardization takes place within your organization. Our next question here is talking about GDPR, so data protection. How have you complied with the requirements of the GDPR, okay, the General Data Protection Regulation Act, and any other organization and awarding awarding body requirements for confidentiality? So in other words, we'd just like for you to talk about how to ensure that your assessments are kept confidential, that they're kept safe and secure as well. So perhaps you might have a database where you store your assessment decisions. Perhaps you have a policy or procedure on promoting GDPR within your organization. How do you keep assessment safe? You might have perhaps a cabinet or an electronic portal which is password encrypted, all of those things that you can talk about within this assignment question. So this will hold you in very good stead for your future assessing role, where you do need to keep assessments safe and secure to ensure that learners' results are kept safely and securely. The next question is talking about legal and organizational requirements as well. So how have you complied with legal and organization requirements during the assessment process? For example, health and safety, environmental policies, procedures. So we'd like for you to talk about how have you kept your assessment legal, and how have they complied with organizational requirements. So you could talk about health and safety requirements here, environmental policy. You can furthermore, you can talk about how have you kept your assessments consistent with other assessors with legal and organizational requirements. Perhaps you've explained to learners about the complaints and appeals procedure, and also that important aspect during the briefing stage as well. So how have you complied, how have you promoted your internal policies and procedures with your assessments here? The next question is, how have you taken account of equality and diversity during the assessment process? So you might have, of course, talked about this during the initial assessment phase, perhaps within an interview with a learner, and just had a conversation of how I, as an assessor, can support you during your assessment as well, and how I can perhaps make any reasonable adjustment to support you with the learning process. How can I make any adaptations as well? Perhaps you could talk about your equality and diversity policy, if you have one, with this assessment here. But how do you make all assessments equal? How do you promote standardization to ensure learners have a fair and consistent approach with your learners as well. You could also talk about perhaps using specialists such as language or support specialists to support learners furthermore within this question. Our next question is, how have you evaluated the assessments you've carried out, and what learning points have you identified? So this is talking about how you as an assessor have really taken on board comments from learners. How have you taken time out to evaluate and take on board what you've learnt as an assessor? Have you had time to self-reflect? Okay. And please do talk about that. So talk about how you have evaluated your assessments, okay, that you've carried out within your assessments here. So do explain. Perhaps you might have gained feedback from fellow assessors or managers. The final question within our professional discussion is, how will you continue to reflect on your assessment practice, and how do you plan to take part in CPD in the future? So for this question, we'd like for you to talk about how you will continue to take part within CPD. How do you continue to really reflect on your assessment practice in the future? This could be perhaps chairing standardization meetings so you can take the lead and you can become more confident as an assessor. You can obviously shadow fellow assessors. You can perhaps upskill yourself by taking on perhaps the IQA qualification in the future. So it's just looking to the future about how you can improve yourself as an assessor there. The final element that you need to complete, if you have been filling out the form, if you are the candidate assessor undertaking the qualification, please write your name here. And we also require an electronic signature or a typed signature from you here. And please put today's date, the date you filled out the form, of course. The qualified assessor needs to write their name and put their signature as well. So an electronic or a typed signature is fine, and the date. And please leave the section for the train aid assessor. That is for the office use only. So this is our video just on the professional discussion. We hope this form is nice and clear. So once again, this section is to be completed by the candidate assessor. So the candidate assessor can, of course, complete those questions before the professional discussion takes place. So you're nice and prepared when you have the professional discussion with your qualified assessor present. And this column is to be, of course, completed by the qualified assessor as well. If you have any questions regarding the professional discussion, please do get in contact and we can make this easier for you. But once again, thank you very much for watching. And if you would like to like the video, and please do subscribe to the channel. And we hope to see you on one of our upcoming courses very soon. Bye for now.